see as the largest effort against the satanic child transgender mutilation campaign. This was Satan combat against the Father and against Jesus Christ. It happens at a Christian Presbyterian school at 33 Burton Hills Boulevard. We have Christian activists from October through March in Nashville who fight through national prison in a campaign to save the next generation from Satan. And there are many people who we know just so happen to be a part of that collective of people who experience that kind of darkness. Invading a Christian school is not, you can think through what happened.
Well, what I will say for my part,
Manifesto. You don't need to hear her mind. What is your point? My point. Yes, sir. My point is that by hearing more of what you think, the phrase used more person's mind, visualize Christianism. By knowing more, we are most likely to come back.
so thank you for that. Thank you for that. And sir, what is your name? Andrew. I appreciate Andrew. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeshua, I do rebuke it. I rebuke the spirit of bloodshed. And I rebuke the spirit of trauma, of horror, of vaccine, genocide. I rebuke it all, Yeshua.
Amen. Thank you, Andrew.
I do not need to listen to an outsider
Thank you, Andrew.
trying to influence local
Thank you, Andrew.
on such a
Thank you.
volatile issue.
Thank you.
You are out of turn. Coming to our city
Thank you.
doing this.
Thank you, sir.
We don't know you.
Thank you.
If we knew you, we wouldn't trust free speech.
I believe in, and I want to say something. I want to say something to everybody here. This is the beauty of this country. We each have the opportunity to express our views in the open. That is the path to truth. We get to truth through hearing multiple views. This is a painful issue. I understand that this is an issue of deep pain in this community, and for those parents and for those family members and for that school that I cannot imagine. And I hope that no parent ever has to go through again. But it is my conviction that no matter how ugly the truth, no matter how difficult the truth may be, no matter how much the truth may be even different than what we imagine it to be, we have to see it if we are to heal. Many people here, myself included, are people of faith. We believe in a power higher than ourselves, and I do not know of a God who says anything other than that we must actually confront the actual truth. Truth always wins over falsehood. The long arc of history, it bends towards justice, and justice is based on truth. And so I have no preconceived notions about what this will say. It was initially my conviction, and it still remains my feeling, that if this had not been a transgender shooter, if this had been a shooter of any kind, like we've had from Buffalo to Allen to the range of other cities across this country, we would have stuck to the long-standing practice in our country of being transparent within 48 hours. I believe that is the truth. But regardless of what the actual facts are, we the people deserve to at least know them, to reckon with them. And I worry that we will neither heal nor learn from our mistakes until we see that truth, and that we the people are a people who created a government that is accountable to us rather than the other way around. And speaking not as a politician, but just as another fellow citizen, we demand to see that truth here in Nashville. We'll take a few more questions. Thank you. It is a fair question that there are members of the community, earnestly, who have asked not to see this released. The sad truth is this is a tragedy for our nation. This is a tragedy beyond Nashville. It's a tragedy in Tennessee. It is a tragedy that we have a mental health epidemic in this country that is spreading like wildfire, and we are hiding from it. We are hiding from the reality of people who are lost, who are hungry for purpose and meaning. perhaps even people who have undergone great suffering that we have not yet reckoned with. And so my concern is that when this legislature convenes, less than 3 weeks from today, they will adopt policies, they will adopt a law, an anti-gun measure in this state that's a form of virtue signaling, that appeases the temporary flares of our tempers, but without actually getting to the root cause of what actually led to this tragedy in the first place. And I think if we should have one objective here, it should be to make sure we have taken every step possible to know that we have at least done our part as Americans to make sure something like this never happens again. And I think those of us who are in policy positions, those of us who are leaders, we should not be able to go to bed at night in peace until we have known that we have done our small part in knowing what we can to prevent tragedy again. And I think that the answer comes down to this. There are two views in this country. There's one view in the United States of America that says we cannot handle the truth. That ugly head, that ugly monster has existed for a long time, singing its siren song. I reject that siren song, saying that we the people, no matter how ugly the truth is, we can handle the truth. And in this case, we demand it, and I expect, on the back of this conversation today, this governor between now and August 21st, when he calls that special session, he happens to be a governor from my same political party. I don't care about partisanship. I expect Governor Lee to step up, to be a leader, to actually have the spine and courage to confront the truth rather than convening a special session based on false premises. And I have every expectation that in the next 18 days he's going to step up and do it. Thank you. We have been in touch indirectly in a way that wanted to be respectful of the families and the school and their privacy. But my heart goes out to those families, and we have to make sure that we respect them at every step of the process, which is why I continue to ask everybody here, even in your questions, please join me in avoiding stating the name of the perpetrator. This is not someone we want to celebrate. We want to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening to other kids and other Americans in the future. So we have thank you for that question. And what's your name? David, thank you for the question. So we have a long-standing tradition in this country, a law enforcement tradition, to say that the public needs to understand what the motives of a mass shooter were in order to help prevent that in the future. We have practices to deal with risk. Is there a risk to exposing the truth? Absolutely there was. Was there a risk, potentially, to telling the truth about what we knew, about risks of vaccines before they're released, telling the truth about risks of lockdown policies before we implement them? Of course there's risk. The risk is that people may, in fear, take on behaviors that we don't want them to take on. That's the short-run trade-off. But in the long run, this country, unlike other nations like Iran or North Korea or China, this nation is founded on the conviction that the truth wins in the end. And we have the courage to stand up to that truth. So are there ways to practically deal with this? We don't have to reinvent that wheel here in Nashville. It has been done on countless other occasions. I will go on record today to say that I would support any redaction in that memo for any kind of behavior for how to actually execute or carry out a killing, or secure weapons, or to go about actually being the perpetrator of a crime. You are correct. There's no public benefit in knowing those specific details that a copycat could mimic. But to understand the state of mind of a mentally deranged individual who suffers from a mental health condition evidenced by gender dysphoria, and sadly, even further at a scale that left 6 people dead, we have to understand that, because that's not just this perpetrator. That is a mental health epidemic that is resulting in violence and death across this country. And I think we cannot stand by as bystanders to watch that happen. I support the transparency in getting to the truth so that we know what that response really is. In my view, now I am speaking in my capacity. Today I'm here in my capacity as an American and as a father and as a concerned citizen. But since your question goes to policy, in my capacity as a presidential candidate, I'm going to speak a hard truth. Something that we're not supposed to talk about, but I think is the hard facts of where we are as a country today. The decline in mental health institutions, in psychiatric institutions in this country, correlates directly inversely with the rise of violent crime in this country. We have to confront that. And while the consensus behavior may be to say we're going to remove guns from law-abiding citizens and feel better about ourselves, that might make some people feel better about themselves in the short run. But in the long run, the right answer, I believe, is going to have to involve some measure of removing severely psychiatrically ill people who pose physical risks to those around them, to remove them from their community, as we have for many times in this nation's past, and during which we had much lower instances of crime and mass crime that we do have today. That's my perspective as a policymaker, but today I'm not here to give a policy speech. I'm here as a concerned citizen to make one demand, which I fully expect will be fulfilled, by a governor to see through a promise that he made to the citizens of his state, that he would release that manifesto, and before he signs any bill into law in response to it, he has a moral and personal obligation to let that truth be known. Thank you. Sure. So after we close the first portion of this discussion, I will address questions relating to a lawsuit that I have filed against the U.S. Department of Justice relating to the politicized persecution through prosecution of a former president and their failure to publicly release information that deserves to be made transparent. I don't want to commingle the topics, and so at the end of the first wave of questions, I'll come back to that topic. As it relates to school shootings and securing our students, here's what I'll say. The $80 billion budget spent by our U.S. Department of Education is over 4 times the cost required to put 3 armed security guards in every school in this country. I think it's not even close, which is a better use of funds. I applaud those 2 officers who did not know that their name would be called that day as they went in and put themselves in harm's way. I watched it at the time, I watched it again today before I came here, the videos of those 2 officers, the body footage. It's hard to watch that without your heart feeling for those 2 officers who took the risks they did that day. But we would have had had that problem addressed even sooner if 3 armed security guards were indeed present in that school. And instead, here we are paying it to a government bureaucracy sitting in Washington, D.C., with thousands upon thousands of bureaucrats disbursing tens of billions of dollars that are actually impeding educational outcomes in this country rather than advancing them. So yes, I stand on the side of taking a small portion of that U.S. Department of Education budget and directing it in a way that actually protects our children, because another school shooting like this is unconscionable. And not 1, but I do think 3 armed security guards per school will meaningfully take a step to preventing this from ever happening again. I would take another question, we'll come back to you. Thank you for the question. So this is a thoughtful question. You are correct that I have pledged as U.S. President to shut down the FBI. I believe it is a politicized institution. I believe that it has set back law enforcement in this country. The same FBI that threatened Martin Luther King Jr. with suicide 60 years ago is the same FBI that threatens political opponents of a different persuasion today. The same FBI that is hiding and sitting on this manifesto that it could have released to the public, the same FBI that in other instances has released the manifestos of mass shooters in this country. And so to the question of who would investigate it, there are 35,000 officers, there are 35,000 employees in the FBI. 15,000 are frontline agents who would do better work in an agency that was not yet politicized, like the U.S. Marshals, who would carry out this particular investigation, or the Drug Enforcement Agency, or the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury. That is how we drive change, and the remaining 20,000 will have to go home and find honest work in the private sector rather than inflicting their policy preferences in the guise of law enforcement. Thank you for that question. We'll take 3 more questions before moving to the second portion of the press conference. You raise an outstanding question, which is that there has been, I believe, painstakingly collected data over a long period of time by law enforcement. And by the way, most of the people who work in the FBI are individually, as human beings, individually good people. That is precisely why it is a travesty when this institution goes out of its way to hide the truth from the public. It is a regular practice of law enforcement in this country to release the manifesto of a shooter. In every major mass shooting that has been the precedent, there is good reason for this precedent. It is the same reason we recover the black box of an airplane that goes down. And yet in this instance, when it was a transgender individual who committed that shooting, in this particular instance, they have chosen without explanation not to release it and even to renege against a prior commitment to release it. That does not build trust, not only in that agency, but even in the very data sets that you describe. So do I believe that we should disregard the data that these institutions have collected? No. I want us to use every tool in our arsenal to make sure that something like this never happens again. But in order to build that trust, we have a government that must earn that trust from its citizens. It's not that complicated. Tell us the truth. Tell us the truth. Tell us the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. We can handle the truth. And that's the way we do things in this country. I'll take 2 more questions from folks who haven't asked. I do believe they're hiding this manifesto. The most important thing in this case, as it relates to the local handling of this matter, should be to make sure that we respect the dignity and the experience of what those parents are going through. We also have to celebrate the heroes and the police officers in this community. That much has to be sacrosanct. But as policymakers at the state level and at the federal level, if we're going to pass new laws that bind the way citizens and residents of Tennessee live their lives, then I think it is a precondition for any governor who is convening a special session of the legislature to pass binding laws in response to this tragedy, to do everything in his power to cause the release of that manifesto. And any number of groups could do it. What's that? I believe that the governor and or other leaders will step up and do their part, and I want to hand it over to Candace.
Let's not pit the parents of Nashville against each other. I expressed to you as a mother what it's like having that happen in your backyard with young children that are going to be attending elementary school next year, right? So the concern, there's no priority. All parents are concerned. We grieved with those parents. We pray for those children. We all have signs as a community in our yard for those children. So I just want to be really clear that the question is whether or not we should be pitting which parent gets more priority. We absolutely have to have answers. Every parent who is dropping their child off today, every parent, as I'm looking at Christian schools to enroll my son into right now, the first question that I'm asking is about security. But I need answers, right? We can't be fearful to look evil. So of course we are compassionate. Of course we have given every bit of deferential treatment to those individuals that actually suffered that tragedy and had to bury their young ones. We all cried with them. So I just wanted to say that because I felt that was saying, do you think you're more important than them? And no, we are a community here in Nashville. No one is more important, but tons of parents in Nashville and in the Nashville area have lost sleep thinking about these children and thinking about our own children. So we need a community answer, a community solve, not questions that pit us against one another. Gentlemen, you had a question right there. Yes. Yes. I talked about this on my show. It's the one thing that we never talk about is big pharma. We never talk about what's in these people's medicine cabinets. We never talk about the fact that we are overdiagnosing children with anxiety, with depression, with ADHD, and we are giving them pharmaceuticals that are impacting their brain structure. And so, yes, I'm speaking in my own personal capacity here, and what I've said on my show, and I will say over and over again, we are always pointing the finger at somebody. We're pointing the finger at a parent, we're pointing a finger at a religion, we're pointing a finger at a person, ideology, and we never have a discussion about mental health, and we never have a discussion about what I don't believe to be a long-term fix to mental health issues, which is over prescribing young minds and expecting their brains to function the same when they're heavily medicated. So I do think that that is one component that I would love to open up discussion for, just as a community, and as all sorts of medicines now that are being given to children.
And courage to confront the truth rather than convening a special session based on false premises, and I have every expectation that in the next 18 days he's going to step up and